I do want to say that this guide is more for players that have never really played League of Legends and are probably coming from games like Arena, Valor, or Mobile Legends. Or, you know, if you have played League of Legends a little bit and you've never really played against or played this champ at all. So today I'll give you my rundown and guide on how at least I specifically like to play AHRI. So for those of you that don't know, AHRI is a mage champion, and some of her perks include the fact that she has high mobility, there's a pretty high potential to do some big damage to champions, and she has some decent CC. Now some of the cons to playing AHRI include she doesn't really have high damage absorption. So, you know, if you're going into a team fight, you end up getting caught out or you end up going into like a 1v4 for some odd reason. Can't really expect to stay alive a lot given the fact that you don't really have high damage absorption. AHRI also doesn't have a lot of utility like granting shields, healing, or giving movement speed to ally champs. But this is also coupled with the fact that she's not necessarily a support champion, so utility isn't really expected from AHRI. Another key thing that you need to know about AHRI that you might not know is that 2 of her 4 abilities are actually projectile abilities. This means that most of these abilities need to actually be aimed, and if you're aiming at a target that's moving, you might want to aim a little further ahead of where they actually are when you actually let off the skill. Now regarding AHRI's abilities, from what we've seen in the gameplay from her so far, it looks like all of her abilities are exactly the same in Wild Rift as they are on PC League. So AHRI's passive is called Vistane Grace, and whenever AHRI's spells hit a champion 2 times within a short period, she gains some movement speed. AHRI's Q, or her 1 ability in Wild Rift, is her orb, and what she does is she sends out and pulls back her orb, dealing magic damage on the way out and true damage on the way back. After earning several spell hits, AHRI's next orb will restore her health. Now keep in mind this doesn't restore all of AHRI's health, only a portion of it. And also keep in mind that this first skill is also one of the projectile abilities. So this is one of the abilities that you will need to aim. Her W, or her 2 ability in Wild Rift, is her Foxfire, and what she does is she releases 3 Foxfires that lock onto and attack nearby enemies. So this ability does not need to be aimed, but do keep in mind if you let this ability off, say in the middle of a minion wave, it's probably going to hit the minions and not the champion that you want it to. AHRI's E, or her 3 ability in Wild Rift, is her Charm. She sends out a heart that damages and charms the enemy it hits, instantly stopping movement abilities and causing them to walk towards her. The target temporarily takes increased damage from AHRI. This ability right here is probably my favorite ability in AHRI's kit just because it has such impact on fights in the game in whole. Her 3 ability is also the other projectile ability that does need to be aimed before launch. AHRI's ultimate, or her 4 ability, is her Spirit Rush. AHRI dashes forward and fires essence bolts, damaging nearby enemies. Spirit Rush can be cast up to 3 times before going on cooldown. AHRI's ultimate is probably one of the most fun movement ultimates in the game just because it can be used, you know, 3 times before it actually has to go on a full cooldown. Now we can talk about how I personally like to use the abilities. So with AHRI's Q, or her 1 ability, the Orb, I like to use it as a form of wave clearing and zoning enemies away in early laning phases. I really like to use it to poke in the early game as well, just to keep the enemy champs at bay and to keep them from really dedicating to a dive on top of you. In the middle to late game, I really like to use it for its magic and true damage properties when used, and I like to use it for poking outside of or leading into team fights. With AHRI's W, or her 2 ability, it can really be used as a really good form of wave clearing, but when you start to build a lot more AP with AHRI, you can really use it to combine with other abilities to output a lot of high damage to enemy champions. AHRI's E, or her 3 ability, can really be used for starting team fights or securing kills in 1v1 or even 1v2 situations. Combining her charm with other abilities such as her Foxfire can output a lot more damage than expected on enemy champions. Now AHRI's ultimate, or her 4 ability, can be used for multiple scenarios, one of which being used to escape fights or escape being chased in replacement of Flash if it's not equipped or it's on cooldown. It's also great for starting team fights or chasing low HP champs for securing kills. It's also great for outputting higher damage, as the dash also emits the fire bolts that deal damage as well. Now keep in mind, these are just some basic tips on how I specifically like to use AHRI, and of course you can always play her how you want. But hopefully this does help some of you that have, probably never played League before, or at least have no idea how AHRI works.